A lonely millionaire had formed a special bond with a little homeless girl he met every day in the park after work. She always asked for food, he always gave it, and slowly they became true friends. Until one day she showed up holding the hand of a stunning woman and said with an innocent smile, "Uncle, do you know my friend?" When he looked at the woman's face, his heart stopped entirely. She was identical to his first love from adolescence. What follows is shocking. Richard Vance had everything money could buy, yet the silence in his penthouse apartment was the most expensive and unwanted asset he owned. From his window, the city stretched out like a carpet of glittering lights. An empire he had helped build, but which failed to fill the void in his chest. At 34, he was the picture of success, a visionary entrepreneur, respected and tirelessly generous with social causes. Yet, behind the facade of confidence and control, lived a man haunted by a memory, a face that time refused to erase. To escape the ghosts that inhabited his luxurious home, he had adopted a simple ritual: late afternoon walks in Central Park, a green oasis squeezed between skyscrapers of glass and steel. It was there, amidst the laughter of children and the murmur of lovers, that he found a brief respite. On that Tuesday afternoon, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Richard sat on his usual bench, loosening his silk tie. He watched the world go by, a spectator to the happiness of others, when a small, hesitant voice pulled him from his reverie. "Excuse me, mister, could you spare $1 for some food?" He looked down and saw a girl of perhaps 8, with tangled dark hair and worn clothes, but with the clearest, most intelligent eyes he had ever seen. There was a dignity in her posture that disarmed him. Instead of the desperate plea he expected, he found a surprising calm. He, who donated millions to charities, felt strangely touched by that direct, simple request. He pulled his wallet from his pocket, but the girl shook her head. "I don't want the money, mister, just the food, if it's not too much trouble." Surprised, Richard put his wallet away and stood up. "Aye, come with me." He took her to a small food cart selling sandwiches and ordered one loaded with everything. He handed it to the girl, who accepted it with a "Thank you very much, sir." That sounded more sincere than all the acknowledgements he received at gala dinners. She sat on the grass at a respectful distance and ate with a delicacy that contrasted with her appearance. From that day on, Richard's walk took on a new purpose. He met her almost every afternoon, always bringing a snack. He learned her name was Nina. They talked about simple things: the clouds that looked like animals, the colors of the flowers, the dogs walking through the park. Richard was fascinated by her insight, by her observations about the world that were both childlike and profoundly wise. Nina's presence was like a balm to his lonely soul. She asked for nothing but the food and the company, and for the first time in years, Richard felt he was connecting with someone genuinely, without the weight of his last name or his fortune. One afternoon, in the second week of their meetings, while they were sharing a bag of cookies, Nina surprised him. She looked up at the skyscraper where his office was, a building that dominated the skyline. "You must be really busy with that new clean energy project." "Huh?" she commented casually. Richard froze, the cookie halfway to his mouth. The project was confidential, known only to his most trusted team. He had never mentioned a word about his work to her. How do you know about that, Nina?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. She shrugged, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Oh, I hear things." But there was something in her gaze, a spark of knowledge that didn't belong to a street kid. He felt a chill run down his spine. Who was this girl? And how did she know a secret kept under lock and key within his own company? Nina's question hung in the air, dense and unexpected. Richard tried to keep his expression calm, but he felt his heart race. That information wasn't public. It was a detail whispered in closed-door meetings. He looked at the girl, searching for a sign. a clue to explain the inexplicable. But all he found was the innocence of a curious gaze, devouring a chocolate chip cookie. He forced a smile. "And where did you hear that, kiddo?" Nina wiped crumbs from her mouth with the back of her hand. "I've got good ears, mister. The wind tells me things." She said it with the naturalness of someone talking about the weather, and the simplicity of her answer left him even more bewildered. He decided not to press, fearing he might scare her away. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. In the following days, Richard became a more attentive observer. His mind, trained to analyze markets and predict trends, was now dedicated to deciphering the enigma that was Nina. He started to wonder if she was a pawn in a bigger game. Was someone watching him, using an innocent child to get information? The idea disgusted him, but in his world, betrayal was common currency. Despite his growing paranoia, his affection for her only deepened. He noticed the dry cough that sometimes afflicted her in the late afternoon, the way she shivered when the wind grew colder. His generosity, once a calculated act of philanthropy, became a protective, visceral impulse. On one particularly chilly afternoon, he brought her not only a hot sandwich, but also a small, pink wool coat. Her eyes lit up in a way no six-figure donation ever had. "It's beautiful, mister. Thank you." She put it on immediately, hugging herself as if receiving the warmest of embraces. "No, you don't have to worry so much," she said, noticing his apprehensive expression. "When you're not here, my special friend takes care of me." Richard felt a mix of relief and curiosity. "A friend? Who is she?" Nina's smile became secretive. "It's a secret. She's very shy, doesn't like people talking about her, but she's good. Sometimes she brings me medicine for my cough and some soup that warms you to the bone." The mention of a mysterious figure added another layer to the puzzle. Who was this woman who helped Nina and preferred to remain in the shadows? Was she the source of the information? The questions piled up, unanswered. On Friday of that week, the sun was particularly gentle, and they sat on the grass, watching people go by. For the first time in a long while, Richard allowed himself to relax completely. Nina's presence had that effect on him. She anchored him in the present, away from the worries of the office and the shadows of his past. He was laughing at one of her stories about a particularly bossy pigeon when, suddenly, she grew serious. Her large, dark eyes stared at him with an intensity that seemed to belong to an adult. She moved a little closer, and her voice came out in an almost inaudible whisper. "Mister, do you still miss the girl who liked to draw stars on the seashore?" Richard's world stopped spinning. The laughter died in his throat, replaced by an icy knot. Nobody knew that. Nobody. It was an intimate detail, a sacred memory he kept in the deepest vault of his soul, a memory of a first love that had shattered him. How could this girl, a stranger found in a park, know the most painful secret of his life? The air seemed to thin, and for a moment, Richard forgot how to breathe. Nina's words, spoken with the purest innocence, were like a key turning in a long rusted lock, opening a door to a pain he thought he had sealed forever. The girl who liked to draw stars on the seashore. Anna, his first and only love. That was their secret, a ritual they shared on the summer nights of their adolescence, when the future seemed like an ocean of infinite possibilities. They would lie on the cool sand, and with her finger, she would trace imaginary constellations while telling him stories about each one. It was a memory so intimate, so pure, that he had never shared it with anyone, not even his closest friends. It was a sanctuary, and now a street kid had trespassed. He grabbed Nina's arm, harder than he intended. "Where did you hear that?" His voice came out harsh, unrecognizable. The girl's eyes widened, a mix of fear and confusion. She flinched, and Richard immediately released her arm, feeling a wave of shame. He didn't want to scare her, but the shock had made him lose control. "I'm sorry, Nina. I didn't mean to. Please, tell me who told you." She rubbed her arm. more out of instinct than pain. "It was my friend," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Sometimes, when I can't sleep, she tells me stories to calm me down." She told me the story of a boy and a girl who drew stars in the sand. The puzzle in his mind began to form a terrible and unlikely picture. No, it was impossible. Anna had disappeared from his life more than 15 years ago, without a letter, without a phone call, without a single explanation. Her family moved out of the small coastal town of Seabrook overnight, and all his attempts to find her had been futile. She had become a ghost, an open wound that shaped his distrust in relationships and drove him to build walls around his heart. The idea that this special friend could be her. It was madness, a cruel coincidence. "What's your friend's name, Nina?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Nina shook her head vehemently. "I can't tell. She made me promise." Richard's stubborn determination, the same that made him a titan in business, took over. He had to know. This mystery was no longer a curiosity, it was a visceral need. "Nina, this is very important to me. I need to meet your friend." He saw the conflict on the girl's face. Her loyalty to her friend battled with the affection she felt for him. She bit her lower lip, thinking, "She's very scared, mister. She says the past can be dangerous." The phrase hit him like a punch. Dangerous? What did that mean? The pieces didn't fit. He imagined 1,000 scenarios, each darker than the last. Was Anna in trouble? Was that why she had vanished? The paranoia he'd felt before returned in full force, but now it wasn't about corporate espionage. It was about something much more personal, much deeper. He looked into Nina's pleading eyes and softened his expression. "I won't hurt her. I just want to talk. Please, Nina, I need to understand." Seeing the genuine anguish on his face, the girl seemed to make a decision. She took a deep breath, a little hero making a grown-up choice. "Okay, mister," she said, her voice gaining firmness. "If you want to meet her that badly, come here on Sunday. That's the day she always comes to see me. I'll ask her to talk to you." Richard's heart leaped. Sunday, only 3 days away. 3 days of agony and anticipation. He didn't know what to expect, whether he would find the answer to the greatest pain of his life or just another dead end. But for the first time in 15 years, a fragile, terrifying seed of hope began to sprout in the desert of his heart. He looked at Nina, who was now offering him a shy smile, and wondered if she had any idea of the earthquake she had just caused. The 3 days that followed were a slow and excruciating torture. Richard could barely work. Profit and loss spreadsheets seemed meaningless, strategic meetings a distant hum. His mind was captive, trapped in a whirlwind of memories and possibilities. He found himself reliving moments with Anna, the smell of sea salt in her hair, the sound of her laughter mixing with the waves, the touch of her hand in his as they walked along the moonlit beach. They were fragments of a past he had kept under lock and key, and now the mere possibility of seeing her again caused the memories to leak through every crack in his emotional armor. He tried to be rational. It could be a mistake, a woman who had known Anna and was now telling her stories to a child. It could be a bizarre coincidence, a trick played by fate. But what about the Clean Energy Project and the knowledge of the drawings in the sand? The pieces connected in a way that defied logic and chance. On Saturday night, sleep eluded him like a debtor. He stood on his penthouse balcony, the cold night wind hitting his face, and looked at the stars. They were the same stars Anna used to draw. For the first time in over a decade, he allowed himself to feel the depth of his loss, the anger at the unexplained abandonment, the sadness that had become a silent companion, and beneath it all, a spark of hope that refused to die. On Sunday, he woke before sunrise. He chose his clothes with a care he hadn't had since he was a teenager before a date. He ended up opting for something simple, a blue polo shirt and khaki pants. He didn't want to look like the millionaire entrepreneur. He wanted to be just Richard, the boy who once loved a girl who drew stars. He arrived at the park an hour early, his heart hammering against his ribs. He sat on their usual bench, his hands sweating, his breath short. Every woman with dark hair who approached made his stomach knot. He rehearsed what he would say, how he would act. Would he be accusatory, understanding, cold, or would he simply fall apart at the sight of her? Time dragged on. The sun climbed into the sky, warming the morning. Children ran across the grass, their joyful shouts contrasting with the silent storm inside him. Finally, he saw her. Nina was walking down the main path, her small steps hurried, and beside her, holding her hand, was a woman. The distance and the shade from the trees prevented him from seeing her face clearly. She was tall, slender, and her long, dark hair swayed gently in the breeze. Every step they took toward him was another beat of his racing heart. He stood up, his legs trembling. He felt vulnerable, exposed, in a way he hadn't in years. Nina smiled when she saw him and waved, pulling her friend along a little faster. They were only a few yards away. The woman kept her head slightly bowed, her hair covering part of her face. Richard held his breath. This was it. The moment that could rewrite his past and define his future. Nina stopped right in front of him, beaming. "Mister, this is my friend, the one who takes care of me." The woman slowly raised her head, and Richard's world shattered. The eyes, a deep and melancholy brown, were exactly the same. The shape of her face, the small mole above her upper lip, the hesitant smile that formed on her lips. It was her, older, with lines of worry that hadn't existed before, but unmistakably her. It was Anna. The shock was physical, a wave of vertigo that made him stagger. The air rushed out of his lungs, and he had to lean on the back of the bench to keep from falling. 15 years had vanished in the blink of an eye, and he was once again facing the only woman he had ever loved. But what left him completely paralyzed wasn't just the recognition. It was the expression in her eyes, a flash of panic, of fear, and something he couldn't decipher. And then Nina, with her mysterious, knowing smile, looked at his reaction and then at her friend, as if she knew exactly the emotional cataclysm she had just orchestrated. The silence that fell between them was louder than any scream. Richard stared at her, his mind short-circuiting, unable to process the avalanche of emotions washing over him. Shock, relief, anger, a painful joy. It was Anna, the same Anna who haunted his dreams. The same one whose name he whispered on the loneliest nights. There, in the flesh, holding the hand of the little messenger of fate. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her name was on the tip of his tongue, a word both sacred and profane. Anna saw the recognition in his eyes, the pallor that washed over his face, and her body instantly stiffened. The hesitant smile vanished, replaced by a mask of calculated coldness. She averted her gaze, focusing on a point somewhere over his shoulder, and her hand tightened on Nina's. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir," she said, her voice controlled, formal, completely devoid of the melody Richard remembered. "Nina speaks very highly of you." The formality was like a bucket of cold water. She was pretending not to know him. That hurt more than the 15 years of silence. It was a denial, a deliberate erasure of the history they had shared. Richard's confusion gave way to a stab of outrage. How dare she? "Anna!" he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. The name hung between them, heavy with years of unanswered questions. At the sound of her name, she flinched visibly, a micro-expression of panic that lasted less than a second, but she composed herself with astonishing speed. "I think you're mistaking me for someone else," she replied, her tone even colder. "My name is Lucy." Lucy. The name was foreign, artificial. It didn't fit the face he knew so well. Nina looked from one to the other, her brow furrowed, not understanding the high-voltage current passing between the two adults. She sensed something was wrong, The mister, who was always so calm, looked like he was about to explode, and her friend, who was always so kind, looked like a statue of ice. Richard took a step forward, ignoring the fake name. "No, you're Anna. We grew up together in Seabrook. We drew stars in the sand." He threw their secret memory in her face, a last desperate attempt to break through the barrier she had erected. For an instant, her eyes faltered. The mention of Seabrook and their ritual had hit its mark. He saw the truth there, swimming in the depths of those brown irises, but she drowned it. "I'm sorry, but you're truly mistaken," she insisted, her voice firm but with an underlying note of desperation. "I've never been to a place called Seabrook. Now, if you'll excuse us, Nina and I have to go." She turned to leave, pulling the girl with her, but Richard couldn't let her go. Not again. He couldn't bear another disappearance. "Please wait," he begged, his pride abandoned. Just tell me why." She stopped, but she didn't turn around. Her straight back was an impenetrable wall. "There's nothing to say. It was a mistake," she repeated, her voice catching, betraying the facade of indifference. And then she was gone, walking away at a brisk pace, almost dragging Nina, who looked back with an expression of pure confusion and sadness. Richard stood frozen, watching her retreat until she became a distant dot in the park's landscape. The hope that had blossomed in his chest over the last few days withered and died, leaving a bitter taste of ash. It wasn't a mistake. He knew it, and she knew it too. There was a reason she was hiding under a false name, a reason she denied their past so vehemently, and that reason, he realized with a shiver, was fear. The panic in her eyes wasn't because she had run into him, it was because she had been found. In the days following the devastating encounter, the park became a haunted place for Richard. The bench where he sat, the path where he watched her disappear, everything seemed to echo the cold rejection from Anna, or Lucy as she now called herself. He kept going there, driven by a mix of habit and a masochistic need to relive the pain. But Nina didn't show up. The girl's disappearance hit him in a way he hadn't expected. She had become his small beacon of joy, and her absence left a sharp, worrying void. Was Anna keeping her away from him? The thought was unbearable, powerless and frustrated. Richard did the only thing he knew how to do when faced with an unsolvable problem. He used his resources. He discreetly hired the best private investigator in the city, an ex-cop named Mike, a grizzled man with eyes that looked like they had seen it all. In his office, with the city pulsing outside, Richard relayed the facts, omitting the personal connection and framing the case as a concern for the well-being of a street child and her mysterious caregiver. "I want to know everything about them," he said, his voice firm to hide his inner turmoil. "Where they live, how they live, why this woman is using a false name, but above all, Mike, be discreet. Don't scare them, especially the girl." Mike listened in silence, taking notes in a small pad. "Understood, Mr. Vance. Discretion is my specialty." While the investigator began his work, Richard threw himself into his. He worked longer hours, attended every meeting, analyzed every report with a fierce focus. Work was his refuge, the only arena where he felt he had any control. But at night, the loneliness of his apartment became a torture chamber. The questions assaulted him. Why did she run? Why deny everything? What could have happened in Seabrook after he left for college that forced her to erase her own identity? He searched his own memories, looking for clues, for any warning sign he might have missed at the time. He remembered her father, a serious, reserved man, an accountant for one of the largest seafood companies in the region. He remembered her mother, a sweet woman but always with an air of anxiety. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They were a normal family in a quiet little town. What could have gone so terribly wrong? On Wednesday, a week after the encounter in the park, Mike called. "I have something for you." Richard met him at a quiet cafe downtown. The investigator pushed a manila envelope across the table. "The woman goes by Lucy Faraz. She's a nurse at City General Hospital in the pediatric ward, lives in a small rented apartment in a working-class neighborhood, leads a simple, almost reclusive life. No close friends, no social life. Work to home, home to work. And the girl, Richard asked, his heart tight. Nina doesn't live with her. She's on the streets, mostly around the park. The nurse visits her regularly, brings her food, clothes, and medicine. Mike paused, looking at Richard over his glasses. I managed to get discreet access to the hospital's database. The girl isn't an official patient, but Lucy treats her like one. She has a chronic condition, something with her lungs, requires constant medication to prevent attacks. The revelation hit him hard. Nina was sick. The dry cough he'd noticed wasn't a simple cold. And Anna, Lucy, was caring for her in secret, risking her career to treat a homeless child. The image of her, cold and distant in the park, began to crumble, replaced by that of an overwhelmed woman fighting to keep a sick child safe. What about her name? Richard pressed. You were right. Lucy Faraz doesn't exist in any records prior to 12 years ago. The identity appears to have been created from scratch. The real Anna Monroe, your old neighbor from Seabrook, disappeared from the records around the same time. Her and her entire family, they just fell off the map. Fell off the map. The phrase echoed in Richard's mind. It wasn't just Anna who was hiding. It was her whole family. The mystery was bigger and darker than he had imagined, and at the center of it all were a frightened woman and a sick little girl who depended on her to breathe. He had to talk to her again. But how? She would avoid him at all costs. And then he remembered Nina. She was the bridge, but how could he get to the girl without scaring them both away? It was then that a bold and risky idea began to form in his mind. The idea was desperate, bordering on insane, but Richard clung to it like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. He could no longer approach Anna directly. The wall she had built was insurmountable. The key, he knew, was still Nina. But he couldn't just show up at the park and expect her to trust him again. He needed a pretext, an irrefutable reason for them to meet. A situation that would force Anna to lower her guard, if only for a moment. The plan solidified in his mind during a sleepless night. It was manipulative, he admitted to himself, but his motivation wasn't selfish. It was about understanding, about protecting. It was about the sick girl and the woman he once loved. The next day, he put the plan into action. Through his contacts, he discovered that City General Hospital, where Anna worked, was planning a charity event to raise funds for the pediatric ward. It was a small community fair, organized by the staff themselves, to be held in the hospital garden the following Saturday. It was the perfect opportunity. Using an intermediary, his foundation made a substantial, anonymous donation to the event, with a single condition: that an afternoon of storytelling for the neighborhood children, especially the most underprivileged, be included in the program. The proposal was enthusiastically accepted. The next step was the most delicate. He needed to ensure Nina would be there. He asked Mike, the investigator, to locate the girl, not to confront her, but to observe her from a distance. Mike found her in her usual spot, near the park fountain, looking thinner and more worn out. On Friday, Richard sent a young volunteer from his foundation, a sweet-faced, harmless-looking young woman named Clara, to approach Nina. Clara didn't mention Richard's name. She simply told her about the party at the hospital, about the sweets, the toys, and especially about the storyteller who would be there. Nina's eyes lit up with an interest she hadn't shown in days. The promise of a story was an irresistible invitation. On Saturday, the day of the event, Richard's stomach was in knots with anxiety. He didn't go to the hospital. His presence could ruin everything. He stayed in his office, phone in hand, waiting for news from Mike, who was on site, disguised among the visitors. The hours crawled by. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, the phone rang. "She's here," Mike said. "The nurse, Lucy, is working at one of the booths, and the girl, Nina, just arrived. She's sitting in the front row for the storytelling." Richard took a deep breath. The first part of the plan had worked. Now came the most crucial part. He had hired the best storyteller in the city, a woman with a soft voice and a captivating gaze, and he had given her a very specific script, a story he had written himself the night before, a tale of a boy and a girl who lived in a seaside town and who, so as not to lose each other, drew constellations in the sand. A story about a promise broken, not for lack of love, but because of a terrible storm that tore them apart. Mike, on the other end of the line, narrated the scene in real time. The storyteller has begun. The girl is mesmerized. Wait, the nurse, Lucy, she heard it. She stopped what she was doing. She's looking toward the stage. Her expression, I can't describe it. It's like she's seen a ghost. Richard closed his eyes, his heart pounding uncontrollably. "Oh, keep going, Mike. She's approaching the stage, slowly. The other nurses are calling to her, but she isn't listening. She's staring at the girl. Nina. My God, the girl is crying. No, it's not sad crying. She's smiling and crying at the same time, like she's remembering something." And then Mike reported the moment that changed everything. The storyteller reached the part where the boy gave the girl a secret nickname, a name only he used, Sea Star. Upon hearing the nickname, Nina jumped to her feet. She turned not to the stage, but to the approaching woman, whose eyes were also filled with tears. And in a clear, loud voice, so everyone in the garden could hear, the girl cried out a single word that made Richard's world crumble for a second time. "Anna?" Nina's cry echoed through the hospital garden, a sharp, crystalline sound that cut through the background music and conversations. Anna, the word, spoken with the clarity of a newly unearthed memory, made Lucy freeze just a few feet from the girl. Her face, already pale, lost all its color. The world around her seemed to dissolve, leaving only her and the child, connected by an invisible thread of recognition that vibrated with unbearable intensity. For an instant, time stood still. The storyteller fell silent. Visitors turned to see what was happening, and Lucy's disguise, so painstakingly built over 12 years, disintegrated under the weight of that single name. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to contain. Lucy was armor. Anna was her exposed soul. She took a faltering step, then another, and knelt in front of Nina, completely ignoring the audience watching them. She held the girl's small, thin face in her trembling hands, studying every feature as if seeing her for the first time. How did you remember?" she whispered, her voice broken with emotion. Nina, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks, touched Anna's face. "The story, the stars, Sea Star. You used to call me that." The memory, buried under layers of trauma and illness, had been awakened by Richard's carefully crafted narrative. The girl didn't understand how or why, but she knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of her soul, that the woman before her wasn't just her friend Lucy, she was her Anna, her sister. In his office, Richard listened to Mike's stunned account. They're hugging. The nurse is sobbing. The girl keeps repeating the name, Anna. "What's going on here, Mr. Vance?" Richard couldn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, his body heavy, his mind reeling. Nina was Anna's sister, the street kid, the secret patient. She was the younger sister he barely remembered, little Louisa, whom everyone called Lou. He remembered her, a toddler of 3 or 4 at the time, always clinging to her older sister's legs. How had they been separated? What had happened to the rest of the family? The mystery, instead of being solved, had deepened into a family tragedy of unimaginable proportions. The emotional reunion in the hospital garden was quickly interrupted. Other nurses, concerned by the scene, approached and led Anna and Nina inside to a private room, away from curious eyes. Mike moved away, promising to keep Richard informed. Alone again, Richard felt a wave of guilt. His plan had worked, but he hadn't foreseen the consequences. He had forced a reunion, reopened deep wounds, and exposed Anna in a way she clearly feared. The panic he'd seen in her eyes in the park now made perfect sense. She wasn't just hiding from him. She was hiding from the world, protecting herself and, unknowingly, her own sister. The connection between them explained everything. The fierce care, the secret treatment, the refusal to involve the authorities. Anna had found her long-lost sister living on the streets and, for some terrible reason, couldn't simply take her home or reveal their identities. She was trapped, caring for her sister in secret, haunted by a past that prevented her from reclaiming her own name and her family. The weight of responsibility fell on Richard's shoulders. He was no longer a spectator, a past love-seeking answers. He was the catalyst for this chaos. And now he had to help. His stubborn determination, once focused on unraveling the mystery, now centered on a new goal: to protect them. He didn't know from whom or what, but he looked out his window at the city he dominated and made a silent promise. He would use all his power, all his influence, to ensure that these two sisters, reunited by a fairy tale of his own making, would never be separated again. But he had no idea of the size of the storm he was about to face. The room where they took Anna and Nina was small and sterile, smelling of disinfectant and anguish. An older nurse, Anna's friend named Celia, closed the door, giving them a moment of privacy. Nina sat on an examination table, her small legs dangling, her huge eyes fixed on her sister, as if afraid she might vanish if she blinked. Anna, now composed but still visibly shaken, held the girl's hands tightly. "Lou," she said, using the childhood nickname for the first time in over a decade. "Do you remember anything else?" Nina frowned, her mind working hard to connect the fragments the story had unearthed. "I remember the smell of the sea," she said in a small voice, "and a house with a wooden porch, and being very scared, a loud noise, and then running." The memory was jumbled, broken, but it was a start. It was more than Anna had had in months of silent searching and anonymous care. She had found Nina by chance, 6 months earlier, during a night shift on a mobile health unit. She recognized her sister's eyes immediately, despite the years and the grime. But Nina hadn't recognized her. The girl was sick, frightened, and suffering from significant memory loss, likely caused by the trauma of their separation. Anna had made the hardest decision of her life, to care for her in secret. Revealing their identities could attract the attention of the people they were running from. It was a risk she couldn't take. Now, the secret was out, at least between them. Anna hugged her sister tightly, inhaling the scent of her hair, a mix of the street and the cheap shampoo she gave her. The joy of the reunion was immense, but the fear was even greater. Nina's memory was a blessing and a curse. If she could remember, what was to stop her from talking about the past to other people? The door opened and Celia came in with 2 glasses of water. She looked at Anna with concern. "Lucy, or Anna, you have to tell me what's going on. Who is this girl, really?" Anna looked at her friend, the only person in her new life she trusted. She knew she couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. In a choked voice, she told a condensed version of the story: her family's flight, the separation from her sister in the chaos, the change of identity to protect herself. She omitted the details of why they fled. The danger was still too real to name. Celia listened, her eyes widening with each revelation. "My God, Anna, you've been through all this alone. Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't put you at risk," Anna replied, "and I couldn't take Lou home. My apartment is watched. They're still looking for me." The mention of "they" sent a chill down Celia's spine. Meanwhile, Richard was in his car across the street from the hospital. Mike had told him the two had been taken inside and the situation seemed contained for now. But Richard couldn't sit still. He felt the revelation in the garden was just the beginning of something much bigger. His gut told him Anna was in danger. He had to talk to her, offer help, show her she wasn't alone anymore. But how? He was the last person she would want to see. Just then, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered, hesitant. "Mr. Vance." The voice was female, cautious. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Celia. I'm a nurse at City General and a friend of Lucy's. She doesn't know I'm calling, but I heard her mention your name once, a long time ago. And today's story, the one about the stars, that wasn't a coincidence, was it?" Richard's heart sped up. "No, it wasn't." There was a pause on the other end. "She's in trouble, isn't she?" Celia asked. "I think so," Richard admitted. "She needs help, but she's too proud to ask, and she's terrified. Meet me at the coffee shop on the corner in 20 minutes. Come alone. We need to talk." The call ended. Richard looked at the hospital, an unexpected ally. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to break through Anna's defenses. But as he prepared to meet Celia in an upscale neighborhood across town, a well-dressed man in a luxurious office received a phone call. "Boss, we have a problem. Remember that nurse we were monitoring? There was an incident at the hospital today." She was called by her real name, Anna Monroe. The man on the other end of the line was silent for a moment. "And the sister?" he asked, his voice as cold as ice. "We believe the girl she was with is the missing sister. It seems they've been reunited." "Find them," the man ordered. "Bring them both to me. It's time to finish what we started 12 years ago." The coffee shop was small and quiet, a haven of calm in the urban chaos. Richard arrived first, choosing a table in the back, away from prying eyes. Celia entered a few minutes later, her nurse's scrubs hidden under a simple coat. She recognized him immediately, probably from business magazines, and approached with hesitant steps. "Mr. Vance," she greeted, taking a seat. Her eyes were kind but heavy with worry. "Thank you for coming. Call me Richard, and thank you for calling." He got straight to the point. "What do you know?" Celia took a deep breath. "Not much. Just what she told me today, that her family had to flee Seabrook, that Nina is her sister Louisa, and that they were separated in the chaos. She said they are still looking for her. She's terrified." Richard felt a knot in his stomach. "Did she mention who they are?" "No, and I didn't want to push. She was already at her limit." Celia fidgeted with her water glass, her gaze distant. "She's the strongest person I know, taking care of Lou in secret, dealing with her illness. She's been carrying the world on her shoulders, but today, when the girl called her Anna, I saw her crumble. She's afraid that Nina being found makes her more vulnerable, that it puts the girl in danger. Nina's condition, that was an immediate, tangible problem." "How is her health?" Richard asked. "Not good. The off-the-books medication Anna gets for her only manages the symptoms. She needs proper treatment, tests. Her condition could worsen at any moment, but Anna can't admit her without papers, without an identity. It would be like turning herself in." Richard felt a wave of frustration and anger, a sick child trapped in bureaucratic limbo because of some unseen danger from the past. "I can help," he said, with a conviction that surprised even himself. "I have resources. I can get her the best doctors, private treatment, no questions asked. But I need her to trust me." Celia studied him for a long moment. "She talked about you once, said you were the only person from her past she missed, but also the one she was most afraid of seeing again. She thought you would hate her for disappearing." The confession hit him squarely. Hate. It was the last thing he felt. All his resentment had dissolved, replaced by an overwhelming need to protect her. "I never hated her. I just didn't understand." "You need to show her that," Celia advised. "She's built very high walls. And now, with Lou back, those walls are guarded even more fiercely." Their conversation was cut short by Celia's phone ringing. It was the hospital. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "I have to go back. It's Lou. She's having trouble breathing." Panic seized Richard. The crisis Anna had feared was happening. "I'm coming with you," he said, already standing. "No, it's better if you don't. Your presence could make things worse for Anna." "I'm not going to stand by while she needs help," he retorted, the determination in his voice unwavering. "I'll stay in the car, but I need to be there." At the hospital, the situation was tense. They had rushed Lou to an emergency room. Anna, using her knowledge and authority as a nurse, was coordinating first aid, trying to stabilize her, but she knew this was temporary. Lou needed equipment and care that only a full admission could provide, and that was impossible. While Anna fought to save her sister, two men in discreet suits entered the hospital's reception. They didn't draw attention. They looked like ordinary visitors. One of them showed a photo of Anna and Lou on his phone to a receptionist. "We're looking for them. Family matter. Did you see where they went?" The receptionist, suspecting nothing, pointed toward the ER hallway. The two men exchanged a look and started walking in that direction, their steps calm and methodical. Across the street, inside his car, Richard saw the two men enter. Something about their posture, their gait, set off an alarm in his head. They didn't look like worried relatives. They looked like predators. He picked up his phone and called Mike. "Mike, I need you at City General, now, and bring backup. I think we've found they." Inside the emergency room, Anna's world had shrunk to the weak, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the wheezing sound of Lou's breathing. The oxygen mask covered her sister's pale little face, and with each difficult breath, Anna's heart broke a little more. Celia was by her side, preparing an injection, her movements quick and efficient. "Her saturation is dropping. Anna, we need a specialist. Tests." "I know," Anna shot back, her voice thick with desperation. She felt trapped. A lioness trying to protect her cub in a cage that was getting smaller and smaller. The door to the room opened with a soft click. Anna turned, expecting another doctor, but her blood ran cold. Standing in the doorway were two faces she hadn't seen in 12 years, but that haunted her worst nightmares. They were her uncle's security men, loyal not to family, but to his money and power. The taller one, with a scar on his eyebrow, stepped inside. "Anna Monroe, your uncle has missed you." Panic paralyzed her for a second. They had found her. This was the end of the line. But then she looked at Lou, vulnerable on the gurney, and fear transformed into a protective fury. She positioned herself between the men and her sister. "Stay away from her," she said, her voice low and trembling, but filled with a newfound strength. "We're not here to hurt anyone," the second man said in a falsely soothing tone. "Mr. Monroe just wants to talk, to resolve things. He knows the girl is sick, he can help." The offer was poison wrapped in silk. Her uncle's help always came at a price, and the price, she knew, was her silence about the financial fraud she had witnessed. The real reason her family had fled. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she declared. The tension in the room was palpable. Celia, frozen with fear, held the syringe like a weapon. Outside in the hallway, the discreet arrival of Mike's men was like a silent wave. The investigator, an expert in crisis situations, didn't make an obvious entrance. He and his team positioned themselves strategically, blocking exits and communicating via earpieces. In the car, Richard listened to the operation unfold, his heart in his throat. He had instructed Mike not to intervene unless absolutely necessary. A violent scene in the hospital was the last thing he wanted. He needed a diversion, something to draw the men's focus away from Anna and Lou. And then he had an idea. He called the hospital director, a man who owed his foundation a few favors. "Dr. Matthews, I need an urgent favor. Pull the fire alarm for the ER hallway. Now, it's a security emergency." Inside the room, the man with the scar was losing his patience. "Enough talk. You're coming with us." He took a step toward Anna, but before he could touch her, a deafening alarm began to blare, and flashing red lights flooded the corridor. Screams and the rush of staff and patients created the perfect chaos. The two men looked at each other, startled. Their attention was diverted for an instant, and that instant was all Anna needed. "Celia, now!" she yelled. She grabbed Lou's gurney and pushed it toward a door at the back of the room, one that led to a service area. Celia ran to clear the way. The men, realizing the maneuver, tried to stop them. But at that exact moment, two of Mike's men, dressed as orderlies, entered the room. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The unexpected intervention bought Anna the precious seconds she needed. She pushed the gurney down the service corridor, heart pounding, the sound of the alarm drowning out Lou's frightened cries. They reached an emergency exit that opened to the back of the hospital. The door swung open into the cold night, and there, standing beside a black car with the engine running, was Richard. He said nothing, just opened the back door. The look they exchanged over Lou's gurney was heavy with 12 years of questions, pain, and a new, fragile alliance. Without hesitating, she helped him lift the gurney with the little girl into the spacious vehicle. Richard took the wheel. Celia sat beside Lou, monitoring the oxygen, and Anna got into the passenger seat. The car sped off, leaving behind the chaos of the hospital, her uncle's men, and the life she had known. She was running again, but this time she wasn't alone. The car cut through the night, the city lights blurring into colorful streaks. The silence inside the vehicle was thick, broken only by the hiss of the portable oxygen tank and Lou's labored breathing. Anna watched her sister in the rearview mirror, her face a mask of anguish. Every mile that put the hospital behind them was a relief, but it also plunged her deeper into a frightening, unknown territory. She was in a car with Richard Vance, the ghost of her past, the man she had spent over a decade avoiding, and now he was her only hope. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice low, never taking her eyes off her sister. "Somewhere safe," Richard answered, his gaze fixed on the road. "I have a private clinic, owned by a trusted friend. They're expecting us. Lou will get the best care, with complete discretion. No one will know she's there." The efficiency and control with which he had orchestrated everything both frightened and comforted her. This was no longer the dreamy boy from Seabrook. This was a powerful man, accustomed to moving the world to get what he wanted. She felt small, helpless, a piece in a game whose rules he dictated. But then he glanced at her, just for a second, and in those eyes she saw not the ruthless businessman, but a flicker of the boy she once loved. And there was concern there, genuine concern. "She's going to be okay, Anna," he said, as if reading her mind. The clinic was discreet, situated in a quiet residential neighborhood. A medical team was already waiting for them at the emergency entrance. Within minutes, Lou was whisked away to a pediatric ICU, surrounded by modern equipment and competent professionals. Anna and Celia followed everything, answering the doctor's questions, providing the makeshift history of Lou's illness. Richard stayed in the background, on the phone, handling the details, ensuring no red tape got in the way. An hour or so later, the chief physician, a man with graying hair and a reassuring demeanor, came to speak with them. "We've stabilized her. The attack was severe, but she's a strong kid. She'll need to be in intensive observation. We'll run a series of tests to get an accurate diagnosis, but she's out of immediate danger." The relief was so overwhelming that Anna's legs gave out. If Richard hadn't caught her by the arm, she would have collapsed. His touch was electric, a current of familiarity and strangeness that ran through her. She quickly composed herself, pulling away slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, the word inadequate for the magnitude of what he had done. "Audrey, you don't have to thank me." He led her to a small private waiting room. Celia, exhausted, decided to stay near the ICU. Alone for the first time since their reunion in the park, the tension between them was almost palpable. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, the unspoken questions hung in the air. "My uncle," Anna began, her voice trembling. "How did he find me?" Richard sat in the armchair across from her. "I don't know. But I know why he's looking for you. I did my own digging after you disappeared." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your father was an accountant at your uncle's company, Monroe Seafoods. He discovered a massive scheme of tax evasion and money laundering. He confronted your uncle, who threatened him. Your father decided to go to the police, but before he could, there was that accident on his boat." Anna shuddered at the word accident. "It wasn't an accident," she said, her voice filled with an old pain. "My uncle sabotaged it. My dad survived by a miracle, but he was badly injured. That's when we decided to run. We took what we could, but in the chaos at the train station, I lost Lou." The tears she had held back for so long finally came. She told him everything: the desperate escape, the fruitless search for her sister, the new life built on fear, the chance encounter with Lou months ago, the dilemma of caring for her in secret. Richard listened in silence, his heart breaking with every word. All the anger he'd felt over her abandonment dissolved into deep compassion. She hadn't left him. She had been surviving. "I'm so sorry, Anna, for everything." He leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes holding her captive. "But it's over now. You're not alone anymore. I'm going to protect you both, whatever it takes." At that moment, in that sterile hospital room, under the cold light of a fluorescent lamp, the walls Anna had built around her heart began to crumble. She looked at the man before her, the man who had crossed the country to save her, and saw the promise of a safe harbor after a storm that had lasted 12 years. But while a fragile thread of hope connected them, Anna's uncle, enraged by his niece's escape, made a phone call. "I don't care how. Use every resource. Find the businessman Richard Vance. She's with him. And when you find her, bring her to me. The girl doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what Anna knows, and I'm going to make sure she never talks." The hunt had become personal. The following days passed in a kind of limbo. The clinic became their entire universe. Lou, under intensive care, began to show signs of improvement. Tests revealed a rare form of pulmonary fibrosis, treatable but requiring ongoing care. With each small victory, a more stable oxygen level, a brief, sleepy smile, Anna felt immense relief. But the shadow of her uncle's threat loomed over them, constant and oppressive. Richard turned the suite attached to Lou's room into a command center. He was a constant presence, dividing his time between business calls, talks with the doctors, and most importantly, talks with Anna. They spent hours together in the quiet of the night while Lou slept. The barriers between them fell away completely, replaced by a camaraderie forged in crisis. He told her about his 15 years of loneliness, how losing her had shaped him, making him distrustful and closed off to love. She, in turn, shared the details of her life on the run, the constant feeling of looking over her shoulder, the pain of carrying a secret that isolated her from the world. "And I thought about finding you so many times," she confessed one dawn, as they watched Lou sleep through the ICU glass. "But I was so scared of putting you in danger. My uncle is a powerful and ruthless man. His power is about to end," Richard said, his voice firm. He revealed his plan. For years, he had suspected the activities of Anna's uncle and had used his resources to discreetly investigate Monroe Seafoods. Finding Anna and Lou had been the missing piece. With her testimony and the evidence he had gathered, they could finally expose everything. "But he'll hunt me down, Richard. He'll stop at nothing. He won't get near you," Richard assured her. And for the first time, she believed him. On the 5th day at the clinic, Mike, the investigator, brought urgent news. "They've found out where you are. My sources say Monroe is planning something for tonight. He wants to get Anna out of here before she can talk to the authorities." Fear returned with full force, but this time there was no panic. Richard, Anna, and Mike convened and drew up a counterplan. They wouldn't run. They would set a trap. That night, The clinic was quiet, but security had been discreetly tripled with Richard's men. Anna sat by Lou's bed, who was now breathing more easily. She held her sister's hand, which squeezed back, a simple gesture that meant the world. Around 2 a.m, 2 men dressed as orderlies entered the room. They were the same men who had confronted Anna at the hospital. "Game over, Anna Monroe," the man with the scar said, advancing. But Anna didn't flinch. She just looked at them with a calm that surprised them. "For you, it is." At that moment, the doors to the room and the adjoining bathroom flew open, and Richard's security men, accompanied by plainclothes police officers Mike had contacted, surrounded the 2 men who had no chance to react. Simultaneously, back in Seabrook, a team of FBI agents, armed with a warrant based on Richard's evidence and a preliminary statement signed by Anna, raided her uncle's office. He was caught by surprise, trying to destroy documents in a shredder. The empire of lies and intimidation had collapsed. Back at the clinic, after the men were taken away, Richard entered the room. Anna was standing by the window, looking out at the night. The tension had finally dissipated, leaving a peaceful silence. "It's over," he said, stopping beside her. "It's really over." She turned to him, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "I don't know how to thank you, Richard. You don't have to." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Anna, all these years, I never stopped thinking about you." "Me neither," she whispered, the confession coming from her soul. He raised his hand and touched her face, the gesture tender and hesitant, as if afraid she might disappear. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. The chasm of 15 years of pain and fear closed in that instant. In the bed, a small murmur drew their attention. Lou was waking up. Her eyes opened and focused on the 2 adults before her. A weak but genuine smile formed on her lips. "I knew it," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "I knew you 2 would get together." Anna and Richard looked at each other, surprised and moved. The little architect of destiny, the girl who sensed they belonged together, was finally seeing her work complete. The family, torn apart by evil, was finally beginning to come together, stronger and united by the scars they shared. 6 weeks after that first chance meeting in the park, the afternoon sun cast a golden glow on the grass, painting the scene with the warm colors of a new beginning. Richard, Anna, and Lou were sitting on a picnic blanket, not as 3 individuals brought together by circumstance, but as a family. The transformation was remarkable. Lou, though still undergoing treatment, had gained weight and color. Her dark hair, now clean and combed, shone in the sun, and her intelligent eyes sparkled with the unbridled joy of childhood. She was no longer the frightened street kid, but a vibrant, safe, and loved child. Anna looked 10 years younger. The constant weight of fear had been lifted from her shoulders, revealing the resilient, compassionate woman she had always been. The smile that was once rare and hesitant now came easily, especially when she looked at her sister or Richard. She had reclaimed her real name and was working with the authorities to ensure her uncle and his accomplices faced justice. Her parents, located in a small town upstate, were on their way to be reunited, a miracle she had never dared to dream of. And Richard was a changed man. The void in his chest, which no business achievement could fill, was overflowing. The generosity that was once a principle was now an emotion. In Anna and Lou, he had found a purpose greater than any corporation, a connection that healed the wounds of his own lonely soul. Lou was in the middle of an animated story about a particularly cheeky squirrel, gesturing with a sandwich in one hand. Anna and Richard listened, exchanging knowing glances over her head. In those glances was a universe of understanding, of silent promises, and of a love that had survived time, distance, and adversity. "Richard," Lou said, suddenly serious, turning to him. "In the past weeks, Mr. had been replaced by his first name. Now that Anna is Anna again, and I'm Lou, what are you going to be? The question, filled with touching innocence, hung in the air. Richard smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his whole face. He reached out and stroked Lou's hair. I was thinking of a promotion, he said, his eyes on Anna. Her own eyes widened slightly in anticipation. He took Anna's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. What would you two think if I tried out for the position of Dad? Lou gasped, her eyes shining with happiness. And what would you be to Anna? She asked, her child's logic trying to grasp the new configuration. Richard didn't answer with words. He leaned in and kissed Anna, a soft, tender kiss, full of all the longing and hope they had saved for 15 years. It was a kiss that sealed the past and opened the door to a future they would build together. When they parted, Lou was clapping her hands, beaming. I knew it. I always knew it. The park, once a place of solitude for Richard and survival for Lou, had become the cradle of their new life. Looking at the two people beside him, Richard understood that true wealth wasn't in his skyscrapers or bank accounts, but in this small circle of love formed on a picnic blanket. The journey had been painful, fraught with obstacles and fear, but every step had led them here. A little girl, driven by an intuition that transcended memory, had brought two lost souls together and in the process found her own way home. And there, under the sky that Anna had once drawn in the sand, three lives, broken and apart, joined to form a new constellation, brighter and stronger than any other.